Imagine standing on a beach about 50,000 years ago. There is no harbor behind you, no engine, no compass, no GPS, only a small stretch of land beneath your feet, and an enormous ocean in front of you. The nearest island is somewhere beyond the horizon. You cannot see it. You do not know exactly how far away it is. And if your boat breaks, there is nowhere to go. Yet your ancestors crossed. Around 50,000 years ago, modern humans reached Sahul, the ancient landmass that once connected Australia and New Guinea. But there was a problem. Sahul was never completely connected to Asia by land. Between Southeast Asia and Sahul was Wallacea, a region of islands separated by deep channels of ocean. To reach Australia, humans had to cross open water, and they probably did it deliberately. This changes the way you see prehistoric humans, because the ocean was not simply something they survived. It was something they learned to cross. During the Ice Age, sea levels were much lower than today. Around 20,000 years ago, global sea level was roughly 120 meters lower than it is now. This exposed enormous areas of land. Southeast Asia was connected into a much larger landmass called Sunder. Australia and New Guinea were also connected into Sahul, but the islands of Wallacea remained separated by water. At some point, walking was no longer possible. You reached the edge of an island. Beyond it was the sea. The question is simple. How did you get there? We do not have a 50,000-year-old boat sitting in a museum. Wood rots, plant fibers disappear, bamboo decomposes, thousands of years of waves destroy almost everything. So archaeologists have to search for indirect evidence, and one of the strongest clues is the destination itself. If humans reached an island that could not be reached by walking, something had to carry them. At Madjedbebe, a rock shelter in northern Australia, archaeologists found evidence of very early human occupation. Some research places the occupation around 50,000 to 60,000 years ago, although the oldest dates have been debated. Either way, the site demonstrates something extraordinary. Humans were already in Australia extremely early in the continent's archaeological record, but they could not simply walk there from mainland Asia. They had already crossed islands and stretches of ocean. And this was not just one person arriving by accident. A successful population requires families, children, adults, food, tools, and enough people to reproduce after arrival. That makes accidental drifting a poor explanation for the entire settlement. Something more organized had to happen. But what? The boats themselves are gone. But researchers have used computer models to test whether humans could have deliberately reached Sahul using simple watercraft. In 2019, researchers including archaeologist Michael Bird modeled possible routes into Sahul. Their simulations showed that accidental drifting was unlikely to explain successful settlement. Even a small amount of deliberate directional movement could dramatically increase the chance of reaching land. The important number was only around 0.5 knots of directional movement in some models. That is extremely slow by modern standards. But over several days, even slow movement can carry you a long distance. You did not need a modern ship. You needed something that floated. And you needed to control it well enough to keep moving toward land. That is the important part. Your ancestors may not have known exactly where they would arrive, but they could have understood that another island existed somewhere ahead, and they could have made the decision to go. At Jerimalai Cave on Timor-Leste, archaeologists found evidence of humans exploiting marine resources more than 40,000 years ago. Among the remains were thousands of fish bones. Some belong to species that live in deeper offshore waters. This tells us something important. These people were not simply living beside the ocean. They were using it. The sea provided food, fish, shellfish, other marine resources. And when you depend on the ocean for food, you begin to understand it. You learn where fish appear. You recognize dangerous conditions. You notice currents. You learn the coastline. The ocean slowly becomes less like an empty barrier and more like another landscape. Except this landscape moves. And there was another challenge. You needed to navigate. Today, you can open your phone and instantly know where you are. Your ancestors had none of that. But humans can navigate using natural signals. The sun, the moon, stars, wind, ocean swells, birds, clouds, distant islands. We cannot know exactly which of these methods were used by the first people crossing into Sahul. There are no written records from 50,000 years ago, but traditional maritime cultures demonstrate how much information the natural world can provide. A skilled navigator does not need a digital map to understand direction. They can read pattern. The ocean has movement, the wind has direction, the waves have structure, the sky changes predictably, and birds can reveal that land may be nearby. A prehistoric traveler did not need to understand the science behind these signals. They only needed generations of observation. Someone learned, then taught another person. Then that knowledge moved with the group. And this may have been more important than the boat itself, because a boat can disappear. Knowledge can survive. Imagine being several days away from land. You can catch fish, but you cannot drink seawater. Every person needs fresh water. Every child needs it. Every adult needs it. And the longer the journey, the more serious the problem becomes. This means a successful voyage required preparation. How much water could you carry? How much food? How long could the boat remain at sea? Could you stop at another island? Could you use rainfall? We cannot answer every detail. The archaeological evidence simply does not preserve it, but we know something important. The people who reached Sahul survived. They established communities. They spread across enormous distances. They learned new environment. They found fresh water. They found food. They adapted. So the crossing was not just a desperate gamble. It was the beginning of a new way of living. Once humans reached Sahul, another challenge began. The landscape was unfamiliar. There were different plants, different animals, different climates. Australia contained enormous animals that no human arriving from Southeast Asia would have experienced in exactly the same way. Yet humans spread. They moved through forests, across grasslands, along rivers, across deserts, and along coastline. This tells us something about the original ocean crossing. It probably was not one giant journey where a group suddenly decided to cross thousands of kilometers. It may have happened through many smaller movements. One island, then another, then another. One generation moved. The next generation moved farther. Over thousands of years, these small decisions created enormous migration. The ocean did not have to be crossed all at once. It only had to be crossed one stretch at a time. Perhaps the strangest part of this entire story is that the most important technology may have disappeared completely. The stone tools remain, the shells remain, the bones remain, the teeth remain, but the boat may be gone. Imagine finding the footprints of someone who crossed an ocean. You can see where they arrived. You can find their campsite. You can find what they ate, but you cannot find the thing that carried them there. That is what archaeology is dealing with. The evidence is incomplete, but the pattern is difficult to ignore. Humans reached islands separated by ocean. They survived there. They established populations, and eventually they reached Sahul. At least 50,000 years ago, humans were already capable of making journeys that required open water travel. No engines, no steel, no GPS, just human bodies, simple technology, accumulated knowledge, and the ability to plan beyond the visible horizon. And perhaps that is what makes the first ocean crossings so remarkable. The hardest part may not have been building the boat. It may have been deciding to leave the shore. Because once you move away from land, the familiar world becomes smaller. The beach disappears, the horizon becomes empty, and somewhere ahead is a place you cannot yet see. Your ancestors went anyway. The ocean was not the boundary of the human world. It was simply another place your ancestors learned to cross.